Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Right Views podcast. I am your co-host Prasanna Naidu, and as always, I am with Mr. Rahul Devdar, author, investor, and a lawyer. And today we are going to discuss about emergency. Okay, so when we think about this term emergency, we always think about the 1975 emergency or 71. I think I just came to know that 71 the emergency was there from 71. Okay, so this is the term which we talk about usually when we talk about emergency. But there were emergency imposed before that too. So let's dive into that. Like, what are these emergencies, and why is 1971 or 75 ka emergency so infamous? So also let's talk about this term, the definition of the term emergency. Like it's defined in Constitution itself. I think in Article 352, as you said. What does it exactly mean?
So basically, under Article 352, Constitution has given the power to the central government to abrogate to itself all the powers necessary for decision making in the interest of national security and public order when an emergency under Article 352 is declared. Now, that allows Parliament to sort of act in a form of a dictatorial mandate. Now, the infamous emergency of 1975 is actually the third emergency that we have seen in the country. So, the first one was during 1962 China invasion. So, at that time, Nehru declared the emergency, which went from 1962 to 1968. Um, Now, the war was actually over in 1 month. And there were some skirmishes going on for like 2-3 weeks thereafter, or 4 weeks thereafter. I think 2 weeks more likely. And thereafter, however, there was peace at the border where there was international pressure also. But the emergency, however, continued to last till 1968. Now, in between, Nehru died in 1964 and Lal Bahadur Shastri became the prime minister. Then Lal Bahadur Shastri died under mysterious circumstances. Then Indira Gandhi became the prime minister. Then in between, Gulzari Lal Nanda was the prime minister, and he was, I think, prime minister for like 13 days or something like that. The first instance. The next instance was Atal Bihari Vajpayee for 13 days. And then Indira Gandhi became the prime minister, and all this happened between 1962 to 68. Now, the second emergency was declared during. So now you can imagine. Now, if you look at the timeline, 62 to 68 is emergency. 68 to 71 is no emergency. 71 again, India Bangladesh. The war of Bangladesh. 71 emergency was imposed. That emergency continued till 1975, where elections were announced finally for 3.5 years. The Bangladesh war lasted, I think, 13 days. Again, 13 days is something very critical. It keeps happening. So 13 days, Bangladesh war lasted for 13 days. But the emergency continued for 3.5 years again. For what reason, we don't know. Then elections were supposed to be conducted. And during that election, collectors' vehicles were used in Allahabad for campaigning in favor of Indira Gandhi, where government vehicles are not supposed to be used for campaigning for a particular candidate. So this issue was brought before the Allahabad High Court, and Allahabad High Court said that entire campaign run by Indira Gandhi was using government machinery and government resources. So it imposed disqualification on Indira Gandhi. Now, to get rid of that disqualification, she imposed another emergency, or rather continued this emergency, which was there from 71 to 75. And that emergency continued till 1977, where, there was a big... so this is the third emergency, which is the worst form of emergency, and which came into force on 25th of June. So we are We just celebrated the anniversary of that emergency. And this, out of all three, was the most notorious emergency because all the opposition parties were members were jailed. The parliament was functioning totally, under the uh, as a dictatorial system. And during this time, constitution was amended without parliament effectively having any operating members. And this amendment in the constitution really changed the direction of the country. A word called socialist was introduced in this, which changed the outlook of the judiciary. In fact, the judiciary literally collapsed. It bent before the government, and that was a really shameful period in this entire episode. And from then on, the decisions of the courts were always aligned more to the government rather than in accordance with the rights of people.
Okay,
Now-
so this I remember reading a book where I came to know that there was something going on in the higher judiciary, the Supreme Court. So I think some of the decisions or some of the orders were against the government, and then the Chief Justice of India was changed to a person who was in alignment with the government's thought. I don't remember the exact name, but this is what happened, and that's after that. What you said started happening more, like all the orders and judgments were in favor of the government more, right?
Yes, that is one aspect of it. The other aspect was the constitutional change itself. So when you when you put a lens of socialism in front of your judges, what happens is the right of majority, that is the group collective right, becomes more dominant than a personal right. Okay.
Right.
So what happens is, suppose you are facing some disadvantage because of some public works, or people want land. Then when the government wants your land, and this has happened in some of the judgments which we have been part of. When government wants the land, the compensation discussion doesn't really come as to market value. Why don't you bear a little bit of pain? That's the question the judges have asked us. And that is completely unfair. Even though there is a right, fundamental right in the constitution to give market value for anything that government acquires, government refused to acknowledge, or the courts refused to acknowledge that as a market value. So see, what happens is, assessment of market value is an estimation. Okay. So for example, suppose I come to your house and take away your laptop. Okay. Forcibly. You have to give me your laptop. Immediately you have to vacate the laptop and go to the court to get the compensation. I am giving you 100 rupees for the laptop. Now your laptop may be, let's say, worth $1,000 or $2,000. Okay. And this $2,000 laptop is 6 months old. Okay. Now, if you apply traditional financial metrics, the laptop value depreciates within 6 months. So your laptop is zero value, or let's say, $100 value, and I have paid you $100. Okay. But the kind of inconvenience that has caused you, and now you have to get another laptop. Okay. Now, another laptop, if you try to get the same specification laptop, you will spend another $2,000. Okay. So the real debate becomes, when you are taking away my stuff forcibly, am I coming to sell to you? If I am coming to sell to you and saying, give me $2,000 for this laptop, then you have your right not to accept that for $2,000. Okay. You can say, I'll pay $100. If you want to sell, sell. Don't want to sell, don't sell. but you were working fine with that laptop. Now you want to buy a new laptop to just replace what whatever your livelihood was going on, running on that laptop. You need $2,000 and you have been paid $100. So where is the $1,900 going to come from? So these kinds of issues, the government says, no, it's a fair price and it's for public cause. So your, inconvenience is of no consequence because you are now a socialist country. If it was capitalism, then the decision would have been you pay him $2,000 and $500 for inconveniencing because you are forcibly taking away his laptop. So that kind of thing has not happened. So you are not happy, or you are not, you are inconvenienced first of all, but you have no recourse to gain back whatever level of employment, whatever level of wealth, whatever level of happiness you are going, just because it's a socialist outlook. And this major change, forget that secular was added. Adding secular was, one part of the debate. Now, Indian.
Just a second.
We'll go. Go to that later. But socialism was so far-reaching, and it. Now you couple that with the prosecution of judiciary by the government, by replacing the Chief Justice, by eliminating, Kapadia, who was in line for being the Chief Justice. He was bypassed, and some other fellow was made the Chief Justice. When these kinds of things were made, you realize that you have subverted the judiciary, and the judiciary then bent backwards. Now the judiciary is hearing these cases like whether CA is constitutional or not. They should have heard this, whether these amendments are constitutional or not. When parliamentarians are in jail, how can you hold that these amendments are worth, they are in accordance with law? It's unbelievable the way judiciary bent its back and knelt before Indira Gandhi.
So why was this term added? Because from what I know, even today, after adding that word, we are still not a socialist country completely. It is a mix of socialism and capitalism, and it was there even before adding this word. It was a mix of socialism and capitalism. Only the proportions may vary.
It was not a capitalism at all. Okay, so adding socialism was not. See, socialism. There was a reason for India to invest in public infrastructure, public sector investments were required in 1947 at that time. Okay. So it's not that they were not required, but to only allow socialist or public sector enterprises or those with licenses, that was not required, and that was imposed by Nehru's fascination for Soviet Russia. Now we don't know what Soviet Russia, leverage Soviet Russia had on Nehru or Indira Gandhi, but definitely Soviet Russia influenced this a lot. Okay, now that was there, but there were fundamental rights given to people. There was a right to property. Now, right to property is a unique kind of right. Okay, and this is where the mindset comes into play. Suppose you have right to life. Okay. Right to life means what? Right to life means, it doesn't mean that I will give you life. Okay. Right to life means nobody can take away your life. Correct? Without due process of law, and the state can take away your life under circumstances. Those are the exceptions. What is right to education? Right to education means you have a right to, you are entitled to education, and I, which is the government, I as a government will provide it to you. Okay, so this is a unique, different set of rights. Okay, now if you look at right to property was that government or any person will not take away your property without due process of law. This was a simple right. This was twisted to mean that government will now have to give you right. Sorry, government doesn't have to give me property. Same with right to livelihood, which means government has to give you livelihood. No, government will ensure your livelihood is not taken away without reason. If you want to pursue a livelihood, we will not stop you. That's what it means. So, what started with John Locke and the U.S. Founders of U.S. Constitution, that Constitution is a way to sort of ring fence the government's rights. It changed completely in Indian Constitution, particularly after 75 emergency. Ki government is the karta dharta, and the rights are what you can claim from the government. This is a completely reverse way to look at things. The government, in its core understanding, what was government? Government was that you, I, and few others will come together and say ki certain of our rights we will give away, so that a collective entity is formed which can do good for all of us. Now, what are those rights? Those rights are that I will not fight for my, I will not take your life. I will not, we will not solve our disputes with the force and might, but we will take it to the court and solve it there amicably, and their powers will, we will accept their power over overlordship of these courts in certain matters. And they were worried that this government will become the whole and soul. And that is why they ring-fenced it with constitution. In 1975, the view changed and the ring-fencing was on the citizens. Now citizens will not get right unless given by government. I mean, it's not completely stated that way, but the outlook and the philosophy has changed. So it's not with socialism, the word, just adding that word, it has become a change of philosophy. And that philosophical change is what people haven't understood, is what, my contention is.
Yeah, so what you said I just got, but still the purpose isn't fulfilled, right? For which the term like constitution was amended and addition of these terms like socialism and all, it is not completely fulfilled, right?
It couldn't be fulfilled, okay, because Indians resisted that, okay, and it would have been fulfilled had not the government become bankrupt in 91. And Narasimha Rao then realized that, we did the podcast earlier of 91 reforms. He realized that socialism is not going to help. By the way, Narasimha Rao himself, under socialist causes, gave away hundreds of acres of his own personal land. And at the end of it, in 91, he realized that this doesn't work. So you are not talking to a person who is just, socialist in theory and socialist who gains by being a socialist. He is a person who is lost being socialist, and yet he was a socialist, and he was still faced with the reality that socialism doesn't work. Imagine that you have a land, you believe in socialism so much that you have 100 acres of land or 150 acres of land, and you have to give 100 acres of it away, and you happily do it because you believe in socialism. So how deeply you must you believe in socialism?
Right.
Okay. And that fellow, when he was faced with this reality, when he became the prime minister, that we don't have money, and the real only solution to it was to become a capitalist country where people create wealth, because babus can't create wealth. They can only prevent people from creating wealth. See, it's a thing, right? For example, you have a cake. You can't divide the cake. So you bring in a person, a babu, to divide the cake for you. To divide the cake, he takes a share of a cake. Okay. And he divides it for you. Now, hopefully that is an equitable distribution. But you can imagine that there is a story of in the Jataka tales and also in Aesop's fable of monkey who was in charge of giving, equal distribution of the butter or something like that.
I remember.
So in the end, the monkey ate everything, and both of them remained hungry. And that's what happens. Bureaucracy ate everything up, and that's what he realized. You know, so people fault Narasimha Rao for many things, but he was a true socialist because he believed in it despite losing his own land and his own wealth. But still he believed in it. And that's the greatness of this man, that despite having all this, he was learned enough to change the mind when he was faced with facts. And he realized that, you have to become capitalist. And that's why for 91 is the, cut-off date where India started doing well.
Right.
So if had it not been for this, had socialism worked, we would have become prosperous. There was no reason to change, and we would have become more and more socialist.
Correct. That's why even China changed its policies accordingly, because they thought that they came to know that
Exactly.
they are not. It's not working. Okay, so now let's move on to the second most controversial word. It's secularism. So, was it just for the vote bank politics this term was added? Because even if that would have not been added, the same vote bank politics would have been conducted as it is conducted now, right? So why was that amendment?
See, this amendment was, I don't know why it was added, okay. But it was to institutionalize this minority appeasement. Because what happened was, in 1970, see, when the nation is born, there are a lot of things that are, that are the right. There is a lot of flux. People don't even know how the democratic process works. India, there was no democracy. In fact, India had a unique, different system. So, like we discussed in one of our videos, we were a more duty-bound system rather than a rights-bound system, which is the Western import. Now, when you give someone a new toy, it takes a little while for you to figure it out. So, we were trying to figure it out, and we had 15 years of emergency. So, in 1947, when India got free, 5 years were spent in drafting the constitution, which was a completely unilateral Nehru rule.
3 years.
Okay, first 5 years. When
47 to 50.
52. 47 to 52. 52, the first government was formed, which was again Nehru, but 52, the first government after elections were formed. So till that 47 to 52, Nehru was having his own way. Okay. So that first 5 years. Then 62 to 68. Then 71 to 75 and 75 to 77. So all in all, 15 years we have spent under emergency only, which is where there is the same construct. There is no right-bound system. This is the same ruler and subjects, that kind of a system. So we were learning the ropes of this democracy. And when we started learning these ropes, by 70, 75, these things started becoming clearer to us. There are things that are our rights, and government is limited by those rights. Our rights and constitution are the limitations on the government. So we have the right. And people started exercising those rights, that we want to be a proud country. And that's when the government realized that we may not be able to continue this unilateral top-down minority appeasement in light of whatever we are doing. So they wanted to institutionalize it. And that's why the word secularism was added. There was no other reason. India, in its own mind, no minority has ever felt the need for, protection of minority, except these appeasement politics.
So, okay. that but apart from this, during the 75 emergency, I remember one thing which was very like, it stuck to my mind, like why such decisions were taking. For example, there were sterilizations done of people. I mean, why was that done? Seriously.
Frankly speaking, you have to remember that the leaders of this country, or particularly Nehru dynasty, had created, because of the emergency rule, they could do what they want.
Hmm.
Okay, they were like the rulers, they were like the kings, they were like the princely states, the princes of princely states. So they didn't find it any different than finding themselves as the ruling class of the whole country. So they were in their mind, because they don't, they were in their own mind the rulers, and we were all the subjects. So they had all the rights, and we had no rights. That's why it came. And population control, see, there were two, three major things. Population control was necessary. It is necessary even today, because there is a limitation on how many resources you can create. Okay, how much resources we have. More the population, the worse it is.
Hmm.
Why do you think China imposed one child policy? Not because it had a fancy to regulate its citizens, because they had no resources. Food was scarce. In 1975, in 1968, the Green Revolution started because we had no food. Okay,
Hmm.
there is this economist called Malthus. Okay, so his idea was that we will run out of food, and humanity will die because we run out of food. That was his thing, and he expected it to happen in 1800s, but agricultural developments kept happening. But in 1968, when we had no food, we realized that yes, it is possible that one day we'll run out of food. You won't imagine the prices of rice and wheat in 1967, 68, 65 were the same as what they were in 91, 95. That was the level of inflation. Okay. And in that time, rupee had devalued. Okay. So rupee was much more stronger currency in 1965. And the prices of rice and wheat and all these agri commodities were very high. Whereas in 1995, if you see, the price of rice and in the devalued rupee was the same. That was the problem, and that's when population became our biggest handicap. So there was a logic to say that we need population control, but that logic was subverted, and a unilateral dictatorial thing was tried out by again a Gandhi family member. We can't help it. Now that minority, that brings me to another part of minority. See, in India, who governs India, right? Who governs the people of India? So you have variety of aspects of our life which are governed by different people. Like your municipal things, city governs, state government controls some part of your life, central government controls certain part of your life. If you are a Christian, the Roman Catholic board, they control some part of your life. If you are a Muslim, some third country, they control some part of your life. Why should we have all that? Why can't Indians control India? Now that interference state cannot do. If the secular word is, state can say, Indians can have to control India. But now with that secular word inside that, the state has to overcome one more barrier. Okay.
Right.
Why can't Indian Christians control the church? Let Indian Christians control the church. Why Roman Catholic or whatever Protestant church from somewhere else has to control? The Roman Catholic Pope has to have a say in Indian matters. Why? So Singapore doesn't have that. Many other countries, they say, boss, you keep your stuff. This is our stuff. Don't interfere in this. So this is what the word secular brings to the table. So a lot of these things are now becoming difficulties. So there are two parts of amendments in the constitution and various laws that have been passed till 1977. One part is basically to prevent the state from doing certain things for the betterment of people. Okay.
Yeah.
To scuttle the state. And the other part of law is to scuttle the individuals from claiming the resources of the state. And they have been applied to the wrong direction. Okay. The state should be scuttled when it comes to taking the resources from the individuals. But there it is reverse. The individuals are scuttled. Whereas state should be allowed to have the control where international interference should be, stopped. State should be able to stop that. Their state is scuttled. That is the most evil part in the constitution. So it's just secularism, this, and a set of duties which have been put in. So it's the classic monkey business. Okay. You say that secularism is added, so certain religion is appeased. You say that cow slaughter will be banned, so other religion is appeased. So you give something to this, and you eat the most of the butter. That's exactly what is happening. So one of the duties is that state will impose, cow slaughter ban, and there is also what you call liquor has to be abolished, right? That is also one of the duties.
Yeah.
So
are you talking about the directive principles?
Yeah, directive principles.
Okay. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
So one of the directive principles is, because Gandhi did not like alcoholism, right? So ban it. Will you ban it? Most woke cultures, most people, they are against amendment to constitution, but they want their liquor in the evening.
Exactly.
So how is this? And Modi is going to enforce it. Okay.
A lot. Yeah.
No, Modi is going to enforce it one day. India is going to become a dry state.
Currently, the economic situation doesn't allow that.
Because it's difficult. I think, we have to realize that, a lot of developments, a lot of laws that were passed, a lot of government's actions till probably 1977, 15 years. In 1977, India was 30 years old. Okay. And out of that, 15 years were spent under an autocratic government. In 1977, we had no way of predicting whether India will go the Pakistan route and become a dictatorial state, or whether India will become a truly democratic country. And we were almost going the route of Pakistan. Indira Gandhi had again won in 1982 or something, 81. And she was in power when she was assassinated. And then Rajiv Gandhi was in power when all the mess really came home to roost. So we have been very close to becoming a dictatorial banana republic, and we have clawed our way back by the skin of our teeth. And people don't realize this. And it is thanks to Vajpayee, Advani, and all these people who, in fact, one of the Vajpayee's speeches during that time, not one. Most of these speeches that time were very famous. 1975, before he was jailed, and that is what created that ground level reforms that government cannot impose itself on the country. If that had not happened, we would have been in a banana republic today. We would have been a Venezuela. We would have been an such other country, even like Pakistan. Why not Pakistan? So we were this close, and thanks to that movement, that we have fallen on this side of the fence rather than that side of the fence. And now in 91, the next phase came when it actually changed, and we had the podcast which discussed the 91 change. Still today, we haven't done the third change. The third change is still yet to be done.
What is that?
The real growth. It is somewhere close. We are somewhere close where we'll really flip into capitalist mode, and we'll really go all engines full speed ahead, and it will happen just very close. We are very close to that point now. Whether it was in 2019, we could have done it in 2020. Then Corona, it came. Now we are somewhere there. I don't know when we will transition into that, but we are somewhere in that point where we'll make the third reset. Like third gear. So we went into neutral in 1975. Luckily, we went into forward gear in after 77 rather than the reverse gear. And then in 91, we can say we went to a second gear. Now, somewhere in this year, we'll go, in this year, next year, we can debate, but we will go into the third gear. And then yet we have, 2-3 more gears to go. I think.
So I'm quite skeptical about going like full on capitalism, and how will it help us grow rapidly, and how our society will it be good for us or not. But coming back to emergency, the movement you were talking about was the JP movement, I guess, right? So what was the triggering point for JP Narayan, right? His name was?
Yeah, Jayaprakash Narayan.
Jayaprakash Narayan. To quit Congress and start a movement against completely the ruling party. And I didn't, from what I know, I haven't heard about him being active in politics later. Was he?
No, he wasn't. Actually, that is the main thing. See, what happened was, and this is something that India has always faced. When India started out, the freedom movement started out, we have lots of our leaders were educated in Britain and in the Commonwealth system of law. Now, this is a rights-based system of law where Britain had to fight a lot to gain that Commonwealth system of law, which sort of regulated or limited the right of the king and the queen. Okay, so imagine that you already have untold power, unlimited power, and people have to create a revolution and create fence around your power, that now you're no longer having any power. In fact, you have no power. By 1930s, Britain's king and queen had no power. I mean, they had power, but very limited. Okay, it's not much that they could do. The parliament and the prime minister would do most of the things. So our leaders studied all this, and they realized what was going on. And they did not study that from books sitting in, remote corners of India. They went to Britain, where they interacted with people, and the people said, we are against king and queen having a lot of power. We have respect for them, but we don't want them to have all the powers and whimsical fancies that they will have, and they will push us into, debt and servitude. because that's what happened during the Crusades. The kings would go fight for the Christian causes, and the people would starve because all their grains would go to the army,
Right.
and people would starve, and that's how the Magna Carta came, and then that's how the whole process started. Now all this they learned, they knew the power, and that's why when Constitution came, the Constitution, even the 1935 Government of India Act was an act to circumvent the power of British Parliament, to circumscribe the power of British Parliament on Indian affairs under a rule of law. So the Constitution is basically that same Government of India Act in different, classified in different terms. The Constitution also circumscribes the power of government. And J.P. Narayan and all, Gandhi himself, Nehru, I don't know where Nehru really was, did he even pass the graduation or not? Subramaniam Swamy believes that he was given a degree just for attending. But Gandhi definitely passed the barrister. Savarkar, Tilak, all these were well-learned people who studied this process very, in great depth. So they were aware of all this. And when they found the 1975 was the last straw. So in this 1962 onwards, when the emergencies were being used, they were seeing the subversion of Indian state. It's not that they were not seeing the subversion. But the thing is, Nehru was one of the dominant characters of Indian freedom movement. So to oppose Nehru was a very difficult thing. So when Nehru made blunder after blunder, what happened was basically, these people who were constitutionalists, who believed in that the constitution is the supreme, and within that constitution, all of us will live happily ever after. They thought that this constitution is being eroded slowly and surely. And 1975 was the last straw where everything was, subverted. Mm-hmm. So that's why it gave a power to question the constitutional integrity. Mm-hmm. Yet the constitution was subverted and they couldn't revert to the old one. That is the worst part. So it was not a full win for, the Janata Party. Mm-hmm. So JP, that's the whole point. We fell on this side, but we were badly injured. We were not went back to a more constitutional, the original constitution. See, in 30 years, and that time the pace of change was not as much. So 30 years, you could have gone back to 1950 constitution, right? It was not that far back constitution. Let's say, if let's say in America this would have happened, and you have to go back to the 1870 Constitution, 1776 Declaration of Independence, then it would have been a total, it's like going back 200 years. We had to go back only 30, not even 30, 23, 24 years, 27 years rather. So why not go back? Why not do that? We couldn't. That secularism word was not changed. Socialism was not changed. Directive principles were not included. And now they are forming basic structure of our constitution as per judiciary. Mm-hmm. So this people are not realizing that while, yes, JP was great and the emergency helped us in this side, fall on the right side of history, we were sorely bruised and those bruises haven't gone away. So that has created a social damage which we are undoing even now.
Okay, got it. So this is kind of off topic, but why do you think JP was not active later in politics?
See, once again, what JP feared, I mean, you can debate about whether it is right or wrong.
Yeah, this is your opinion.
This is my opinion. Ki, as a person or as circumstances, he thought that if he became the prime minister and he tried to, rework the whole thing, then it would be a disservice to his dharma. Okay, then it will be a continuation of different. It will be continuation of old order under different head.
Yeah.
To truly dismantle, he has to give up, and the next few people have to give up. You can't replace the old order. You have to replace the old order, not the old head of order. If he would have added, then he would be the head of a new order, but he will still be the old order only with the new head. And this is what many dictators tried. Even in Philippines, the Duterte, he's saying, I will give power back. Some of these dictators in Myanmar also, we will correct the country and we'll give the power back to the government. It never happens. Someone has to make that sacrifice. I mean, there are more learned people, and probably Advani and Vajpayee is no longer there, but those people will be in a better position to share why JP did not do that. But my sense is that as a person, he would have been new head of an old system, and I think he would rather not have himself in that position, rather have a new system, and probably that helped us.
Yeah, I think, right. Kind of.
Though Indira Gandhi was not prosecuted for her crime. No, she should have been prosecuted. She brought the country. It is the greatest. See, when you make a anti-national statement, what are you making? When let's say you make Bharat Tukde Tukde Honge, what is the statement? The statement is that you are subverting the constitution, right? Here is a person who has subverted the constitution right on record, blatantly. What more proof do you want? There is no proof required, but you fail to prosecute her. This is the greatest subversion in my mind. She should have been jailed for life, if you ask me.
Yeah, that's a topic for debate, but yeah, I completely agree if that was the case, because whatever we have heard, the horrors of emergency. Okay, I think that was a quick sneak peek into 1975 and 71 emergency and what this emergency is about. And frankly, I didn't know about the emergencies which were there in like 62 for 4 years. Because we have just heard about 71, 75. So I came to know about these things too, and hope our audience.
I think 71 also not many people know. Only 75
only 75. Yeah. Okay. So that's it for this episode, guys. I think I guess you all enjoyed it, and if this was quite informative or you liked our perspective on it, please do share this episode with your friends and colleagues. Also tag us wherever you share, and do tune in for our next episode next week. Thank you.
Thank you.